I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is my story, Another Kingdom, performed by Michael Knowles. In the last episode, in Galiana, Austin was sentenced to be tortured until he confessed to the murder of Lady Kata Palav. But just as the executioner came to his dungeon cell to take him away, a magical lady rodent named Maud burst his bonds and helped him escape. Swept back into Los Angeles, he went to see novelist Sean Gunther in hopes of finding the mysterious novel Another Kingdom by Ellen Evermore. On the way, he had to shake a kitten-faced thug and his bald thug companion following him in a black Mustang. And now, episode 5 of Another Kingdom.
Soon, I was winding high into the hills. Night fell. The twinkling star-like lights of Hollywood danced below me, going in and out of view on the snaking roads. I made my way to Sean Gunther's address and pulled the Nissan to the curb across from his steep driveway. I shut down the engine and stepped out. The driveway was blocked by a heavy metal gate. A small wooden door, painted black, stood beside the gate. A bell and intercom stood on a concrete column beside the door. Curb, driveway, gate, door, and bell all stood under the pines and oaks that lined the quiet road. There were no street lamps. It was dark everywhere except where a single hooded bulb burned dimly on the concrete column. I still felt pretty good, pretty hero-like about losing that car. But who was it? What the hell was it all about? Would Kitten Face and Billiard Ball be parked in the red zone outside my apartment when I went home? Lost in these thoughts, I walked up the drive and stood under the single bulb and pressed the bell button. If it made a sound, I couldn't hear it. I stood and waited, listening to an owl going woo woo in the trees. Nothing else happened. I pressed the button again. Beyond the gate, a door opened and closed. I felt that surge of sort of fear, sort of excitement again. I heard footsteps, a woman's, high heels on stone or slate. I smelled her before I saw her, a rich, dark, sensual perfume that would have been overpowering indoors. The latch on the door clacked. The door swung open and there she was. No doubt in my mind what she did for a living. A prostitute. A cheap streetwalker, judging by her ridiculously short shorts and the lattice tank top that let her breasts show through, and her ridiculously tall, ridiculously red high heels. She had a cheap face, too. Hard and cynical. But her hairstyle, that was kind of odd. I don't know much about these things. I don't know what kind of hairstyle you call it, but it was not a hooker's hairstyle. Not long and loose like I saw hookers wearing on the street sometimes. It was elegant, a complicated do. The hair piled up, the blonde strands interwoven. Something like what I've seen brides wear. Anyway, that's what it looked like to me. I started to introduce myself. "Hi, my name is Save It Baby. I'm just leaving." She strutted by me. Clack, clack, clack. The door began to swing shut behind her, so I had to reach out fast and grab it. "Thanks for the distraction," the hooker said. "If you hadn't rung the bell, I'd have never gotten out of there." I watched her move off into the darkness, wobbly on those heels. She worked her phone as she maneuvered down the slope of the driveway to the curb, calling for a pickup, I guess. I had a brief, instinctive, gentlemanly urge to offer to keep her company in the dark till her car arrived, but it seemed a kind of dopey notion, given what she was. I went inside and let the door shut behind me. The house was a big boxy white stucco, with long windows reflecting the distant lights of the city. I walked over the slate path along the side of it, looking for a door. I found one, but before I could knock, I heard a low muttering from around the corner. I continued along the path to the back of the house. I found Sean Gunther there. The author was on the mountaintop patio, pacing a staggered trail back and forth on the slate paving stones. The water of a kidney-shaped pool flashed under nightlights behind him. There were deck chairs here and there and small round tables. Beyond, far away and far below, was Hollywood. Twinkling colors on a sable bed of night. Gunther was a tall man, well over 6 feet and lanky. He still had the swept-back lion's mane of silver-white hair I'd seen in his picture online, but from what I could see of his profile when he paced past, his high, flat, white, noble, majestic face was pitted and scarred by an oozing red rash that curled up the side of his cheek to his brow. He wore dockers on bare feet and white slacks and a long-sleeved white pullover. His slender body waved like a reed in soft breezes. He gestured with the plastic yellow tumbler in his hand. I noticed there was a whiskey bottle and an ice bucket and another tumbler, this one purple, on one of the little tables near him. "Actually, I don't think women really have personalities," he was declaring. "Not like I think of personalities, individual characters. Each man is the man he is, but every woman is all women, really. A principle more than a person, if you see what I mean. He was talking to the hooker. He hadn't even realized she had slipped away. It made him seem like kind of a dick somehow, the fact he hadn't even noticed. That and the adolescent crap he was spouting in that voice men use when they're secretly angry but want to play it cool and philosophical. I disliked the guy on sight. I came closer to him and stopped. I caught a whiff of the hooker's perfume on the chill night air. I could understand why the poor girl had seized on my arrival as a chance to get out of there. That's why this is honest, you see. An honest transaction, the author went on, swirling his plastic yellow tumbler in the air. Everything I want from any woman I can get from you in my imagination, and money is cheaper than lies or affection. I don't have to— Mr. Gunther, I said. It really startled him. He was maybe 2 yards away from me and so immersed in his own bullshit he hadn't seen me there at all. He jumped and spun, his silver mane jouncing. It was kind of comical, really. How the fuck did you get in here? He said, glaring at me. My name? I didn't ask your name. Who gives a shit? Where's my whore? She left. That's how I got in, when she opened the door to go. He blinked at this, puzzled. Then he gazed into space through a haze of alcohol. His head tilted. He looked like a dog who's heard a strange noise. I could see the story assembling itself in his mind. The hooker slipping out, me slipping in. A humiliating story when you come to think about it. He couldn't even pay a girl to listen to his crap. I felt for him, kind of. My name, what? He said, coming out of his fugue. My name is Austin Lively. I called you. It took a moment, but this got through. He remembered. He nodded with great seriousness, as if it were some deep truth he had just comprehended. Oh yeah, he said. Austin Lively. He took a staggering sideways step. It brought him to one of the deck chairs. He flumped down into it, draining his tumbler even as he went, so that the ice rattled against the plastic. 3 days and forever, he growled. I don't know what he could have said that would have surprised me more. That was the name of my script. The script I'd written while I was still in film school, the one that got optioned and then destroyed in what screenwriters call development hell. You read it? I said. I couldn't keep the dumb astonishment out of my voice. I read everything, he said, draining his tumbler again, just for show this time, just for the gesture. He leaned forward in his chair and snagged the whiskey bottle off its table, dumped some whiskey in his tumbler, then put the bottle back and plucked some ice from the bucket and plopped that in the tumbler too. Help yourself, he said. The only other tumbler was the purple one by the bucket. It had lipstick on the rim, the hooker's glass. No thanks, I said. Why did you read my script? I told you, I read everything. Trying to remember how it's done, he added with morose self-pity. He drank. It was good. Your script. You're good. Thanks. It seemed stupid to feel pleased by the praise of a guy like this, but I was. It had been a long time since my last compliment. Another kingdom, he went on, leaning forward with his elbows on his thighs and his tumbler in his 2 hands, speaking down between his parted knees to the patio slates. That's why you're here, right? Another kingdom. I was surprised again, and excited now too, because it felt like I was getting somewhere, that I was on the right track. He knew who I was, why I was here. He must know something more about what was happening to me, right? That's right, I said. Ellen Evermore, he said. He spoke the author's name in a wistful, far-away tone, smiling sadly to himself. Yes, I said. Another Kingdom by Ellen Evermore. He was already stretching back in the chair, reaching into the pocket of his white slacks, dragging out his phone. Woozily, swaying where he sat with the effects of the drink, he worked the keys with one hand. Then he held the phone out to me, dropping back hard in his chair when I took it, as if the effort had exhausted him. I looked at the phone, at the photograph on the screen. Ellen Evermore. And now, suddenly, I understood this whole scene I'd wandered into. The picture was a candid, taken in what looked like a museum. She was turning to face the camera, turning away from the wall where there hung a painting of a man clothed in fur with a woman on either side of him. Gunther must have called to her and taken the picture when she turned. She was smiling slightly, the way a woman does when she catches you admiring her, and she's pleased, but she wants to scold you a little too to show her modesty, how silly you're being. She had a nice face. A hell of a nice face, actually. Not beautiful, not like a model or a movie star is beautiful, but there was something about it. It came right out of the picture at you. You could tell. This was somebody. A personage. A whole woman. Young, 30 at most, but with a sort of serenity and firmness and humor about her, in her eyes, at the corners of her mouth, that made her seem older than her years. You could see she was kind and feminine and gentle, same as you could with Jane Janeway when you looked at her. But she had this authority, too. That also made her seem older, like she had seen things and was honest about what she'd seen, and it had made her quiet and wise. Anyway, I noticed all this, and I noticed she had a fine figure, not skinny and muscular like a lot of girls these days, but showing full and soft in a modest, old-fashioned dress of royal blue. Most of all I noticed, I couldn't miss, her hair, her hairstyle, because it was the same do the hooker had had, her golden hair piled high and interwoven. Of course, the elegant style of it was more suited to Ellen Evermore, because you could tell she was elegant all through to her soul, but in its particulars it was the same as the hooker's. So that explained what Sean Gunther had hired the streetwalker for, and it explained the crap he was spewing when I walked in. That one girl was the same as another, that one could stand in for all. Trying to convince himself, I guess. The poor bastard. I handed the phone back to him. "Nice," I said. He took the phone and studied the picture himself. And you know how sometimes you can see a man's whole history on his face? It was like that then with Gunther. The big first novel, the early fame, the wrong choices that grew out of his own personality and the disappointments that grew out of his choices, and the drugs and booze, and finally this loss, Ellen, symbolic of all the other losses and capping all the rest, and leaving him to live out the down-swirling pattern of his now indelible character. You could see it all right there. He said finally, as if none of it mattered, as if who cared about Ellen Evermore or any damn thing. He stuffed the phone back in his pocket and went after his tumbler hungrily. Then he dropped back in his chair again. "She read my book," he said. He said it as if he was recalling a distant dream of youth. 1,000 pages of self-referential drivel. He nodded, to himself more than me. "That's why she came. She read my book. Just showed up at my door one day, looking like that, like what she looked like, with one of those big purses, satchel purses on her arm. She had her own book in there, Another Kingdom. She had it printed up with this whole elaborate binding." He went into another fugue state, remembering, maybe daydreaming. His eyes fluttered as if he might fall asleep right then and there. The booze, you know. It was getting to him. I tried to keep him going. "She wanted you to read it," I said. "Right? Young author, admired your work, and she wanted you to read hers." "Happens," he barely managed to say. "Now and then. Still, sometimes." He took a deep breath through his nose. It seemed to revive him. He straightened a little in his chair. "You read a page or two, you fuck 'em, then you talk some shit about the writing life. They feel encouraged and go away, you know." I nodded. I didn't know, actually, but it was easy enough to imagine. The author's expression turned inward again. He stared into low space. "She wouldn't, though." "Wouldn't go away?" "Fuck," he snorted. "I thought they all fuck nowadays, the young girls. I thought that was the whole point of them." I laughed. The guy was so much himself, you sort of had to. "Did you read the book?" I asked him. He shrugged, took another slug of booze. "Couple of pages, enough to get her to do me. Then when she wouldn't," he shrugged again. "So she left?" Gunther frowned, shook his head. "No. I mean, yes. But she came back every day to read." "Sorry?" He pointed vaguely to the house with his tumbler-free hand. "My stuff, my whatever, collection. She came every day. Every morning He gestured weakly with the tumbler, looking for the right phrase. Or not the right phrase, I think. Something more vague than that. Something that wouldn't tell as much truth as the right phrase would have. In the end, I think he just gave up and came out with it, truth and all. "And she took care of me." I could imagine that too. Her cleaning the vomit and piss off him after he drank himself stupid, feeding him, bringing him back to some semblance of his squandered humanity. No wonder he fell in love with her. "And then she read my stuff, my collection. That's how she found you." That stopped me. I felt the excitement again, that sense again that I was getting somewhere. I needed a second or two to think it all through, but I could see I didn't have much time. Gunther's eyes were sinking shut again. He was going to pass out, and soon. "She found me," I repeated, trying to keep him on task while I figured it out. 3 days and forever." I was thinking as fast as I could, trying to put it all together before I lost him. Ellen Evermore had read Gunther's book and had thought he would understand Another Kingdom. But when she got to him, she found this ruin, this self-pitying drunk of a lost soul, wasting himself in cynical dissipation, unable to understand anything beyond pleasure and pain. So she started to read, his collection, whatever that was. Maybe a collection of writers he admired. The writers he studied to, what was the phrase he'd used when I first came in? To try to remember how it was done. Looking for someone else who might understand. She'd found my script and she wanted to send her book to me, I said. She liked my script and she wanted me to read her novel. He barely had the strength to speak anymore, but he nodded. I raised my voice, trying to rouse him. What happened then? You looked me up. You found I was at Mythos. Again, he nodded, his head listing to one side, his mouth slack, drool collecting at the corner of his lips. So you submitted the book to me through your friend at Mythos, Henry Quint, for her, not yourself. You did it for her. Now even nodding seemed to be too much for him. What happened then? I asked him, nearly shouting to try to wake him up. Why did you withdraw it, or was it her? If she wanted me to read it, why did she withdraw it? Mr. Gunther, I actually stepped forward then, actually gripped his shoulder and shook him. It made his eyes fly wide. He struggled to sit up straight. He looked at me where I stood over him as if he was startled to find me there. Mr. Gunther, why did she withdraw it? I asked again. Do you have a copy? Do you know where Ellen Evermore is now? His answer came out slurred to the edge of incomprehensibility. Global. What? He tried again. Left me. Disappeared. Global. With that, the plastic yellow tumbler fell from his slack fingers. It clattered onto the patio, spitting a stain of whiskey onto the slates, spilling a few melting chunks of ice. Gunther's head fell forward, and he started snoring heavily. He was unconscious. I shook him again, but it was no use. He was all gone. I stood there looking around me at the glittering pool water and the glittering city lights below and the glittering stars beyond. I sighed, frustrated. Then I decided to search the house. It was a crazy idea. The minute it popped into my head, I could see how crazy it was. Gunther might wake up and find me inside. He could call the police on me, have me arrested. He could even shoot me dead, if he had a gun handy. Sure, but on the other hand, it'd be kind of an adventure, wouldn't it? Daring, even fun. After all, I was still the dashing hero who had pulled the maneuver that dumped the black Mustang with kitten face and billiard ball in it. Wasn't breaking into a house the sort of thing a swashbuckler type like myself would do next? Anyway, the more I thought about it, the more it seemed to me there wasn't much choice. I needed to find that book. It was my only clue to what was happening to me. I knew Ellen Evermore had brought a copy here. Maybe she'd left it behind. Or maybe she'd left a forwarding address or an email address or something like that. By the time I finished explaining all this to myself, I had already left the snoring drunk slumped in his chair poolside. I was down the slate path. I was at the front door. Gingerly, I tried the knob. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open just a little and listened for an alarm. No alarm. None that I could hear, at least. I slipped inside. Well, right off the bat, here was another part of the story clarified. What Gunther meant by my stuff, my collection, it was all over the place. Manuscripts, hardcovers, paperbacks, loose pages, even a few e-readers and a couple of computers. They littered the room. Nice room, too. A small foyer and then 2 steps down into a broad sunken living room. An expanse of elegant tile with a black metal fire pit in the center. There was a wall of windows beyond that, a view of night and stars and the lights of Hollywood. There was a black leather sofa in front of the pit. It was practically upholstered with pages and books. There was a long, low coffee table with a mosaic surface covered in volumes and a computer and more pages. There were 2 armchairs, one to either side of the fireplace, both buried in pages, e-readers, books. Everything else was books, too. Walls, nooks, crannies. Fine wooden shelves packed tight with volumes, all well-thumbed, well-read, well-worn. Lampstands with shelves underneath. A writing table near the window with shelves for a backboard. A couple of side tables with shelves. All the shelves crammed tight with books and pages. Trying to remember how it's done. I came down the foyer steps slowly, nervously, as if I was expecting the books to jump up suddenly and rush at me from every side. I stepped cautiously amidst the mess, moving little by little across the room. My eyes passed over the bindings and pages, pausing here and there on a title or a name I recognized. Famous titles and famous names and titles from today's bestseller lists, and some titles I only recognized because I'd read them for my job. I could imagine, I could almost see Ellen Evermore, seated here, then there, different places around the room, going through them all, each book, each script, each page, paying for the privilege with her patient care of the stinking drunk who used to be an author. I wondered if she realized how the helpless wreckage of a man was helplessly falling for her. Or was she too busy searching through the volumes? Searching for me, as it turned out. Why me? Why did she want me to read her book? Or had she made a mistake in having Gunther send it to me? Is that why she had withdrawn it? And where had she put it? And where had she gone after that? I tiptoed past the fire pit. And then I saw it. The sight made me stand still. I drew a long, slow breath, trying to keep myself calm. In the middle of the bookshelf against the wall to my left, the last in a row of bookshelves, right up beside the writing desk at the window, there was a low, inset cabinet, more shelves behind 2 glass doors. I could see even from where I was standing that this was where Gunther kept his most cherished volumes, old leather-bound antiques. Smack in the center of them was one thick red volume with golden letters on its ribbed spine. I couldn't read the title from there, but I knew right away what it was. I just knew. I took a slow step toward it, then a second, then a third. Then, yes, I could make out the words, Another Kingdom. I went the rest of the way to the cabinet, tugged on the knobs of the glass doors. Locked. I tugged again. Still locked. Locked for sure. There was a keyhole on one door, near the middle where the doors met. The keyhole seemed to stare at me. It reminded me of the ogre in the dungeon, the ogre's single eye. I hesitated, at a loss. I thought of grabbing the paperweight off the desk and breaking the glass, but I couldn't quite bring myself to do it. Seemed wrong, vandalizing the man's home while he slept. Instead, I took out my phone and hunted up a video online. How to pick a lock with a paperclip. There were several videos of that title to choose from. I selected one in which the lock looked like the lock in front of me. I pressed play. "Okay then," said the willowy, long-haired man in the video. "Today, I'm going to show you how to pick a lock with a paperclip." A few minutes later, I was on my knees working with a pair of paperclips from the writing desk's front drawer. I had the video playing through for a second time, and I followed the instructions as the willowy man gave them. I'm not sure I actually believed it was going to work, but lo and behold, the latch snapped back just like the willowy man said it would. The cabinet door swung ajar. Yay, internet. I tossed the paperclips to the floor, swung the door open the rest of the way, reached for the red volume, touched its red leather spine. Then someone screamed. Sean Gunther. Sean Gunther screamed out on the patio. I leapt to my feet, looked toward the window, but I couldn't see the patio from there. Sean Gunther screamed again, and there was a splash. Something was wrong. I had to go help him. I turned to the door. The kitten-faced man or woman from the Black Mustang was standing there, standing in the open doorway. He, or she, was holding a gun pointed at my chest. "If you move, little peaches, I will kill you," he said. He spoke in a feminine voice, but a man's voice. That is, a man's deep voice, with a sickly, sweet, feminine tone. He was wearing tight, skinny black jeans that showed off the womanly shape of his legs. He had a black windbreaker on over his copper t-shirt now, so I couldn't see the big man muscles of his arms anymore. Still, his upper torso was man-sized, no question. His small, kitten-like face had a coy, flirty smile on it. His eyes appraised me sexually, going up and down my length, even as he held the gun steady. Out on the patio, out of sight, Sean Gunther gave a strangled groan of anguish. Kitten Face pouted at me, as if it was all such a pity, wasn't it? "Who are you? What do you want?" I asked him. "Quiet, baby, or mama spank," he said, lifting the gun a little as a threat. Sean Gunther screamed again, tears in his voice now. It reminded me of the screaming heretic in Galliana. Not as bad, not that high-pitched, agonized wail from the bowels of the castle dungeon, but I could hear that Gunther was in pain, real pain. I thought of the thuggish billiard ball who was probably out there with him. I considered Kitten Face. It's a funny thing about having a gun pointed at you. How many movies had I seen? How many books had I read where the hero had that happen? Sometimes I'd watch a scene or read a scene and think, why doesn't he just go for it, you know? Why should he do whatever the gunman tells him to do? Put his hands up, or get in the car, or get on his knees, or lie down on his face. If the killer's going to kill him anyway once he's helpless, why not just go for the main chance, whatever's left? Turns out, in real life, there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do. Kitten Face was clear across the room. I couldn't reach him, and even if I could, I doubt I would have had the courage. That black boar staring at me. And me, one finger twitch from Kingdom Come. My brain went on the fritz as it searched itself for options and came up with nothing. So I just stood there, like the heroes in the movies. I even put my hands up instinctively. Or maybe because it was what heroes in the movies did. Plus, I was afraid. Not to state the obvious, but I was afraid of getting shot, afraid of dying. I tried not to think about how afraid I was, but I didn't have to think about it. I just was. Now there were footsteps outside. Heavy, thumping footsteps. To the left of the gunman, through the window, out there in the night, I saw Billiard Ball moving over the path by the house. He was coming from the patio, approaching the front door. Kitten Face glanced his way, then sashayed a step or two into the foyer to make room for him. He swung his hips elaborately as he moved and eyed me as if he thought I might be watching his hips and how they swung. He made a big show of it. I felt he was mocking me. It pissed me off. That and the gun. He kept the gun trained on me the whole time. Billiard Ball walked in. He was dragging Sean Gunther by the ankle, dragging him behind him as if he were nothing, no weight at all, the way a little kid tows a security blanket. Gunther was drenched from his sopping silver hair to the darkened knees of his white slacks. Billiard Ball must have held him by the ankles and dunked him head first into the pool. The author lay on his back, dazed, with his hands lifted and his eyes open and his mouth open as he was dragged helplessly over the floor. His nose was smashed and there was fresh blood on his upper lip. Billiard Ball slung the writer's body into the living room like you might sling a stick for a dog to fetch. Gunther cried out as he flew down the 2 stairs from the foyer. His cry was cut short as he landed hard on the tiled floor, sending scattered papers flying. He groaned then. He rolled over onto his front, propping himself up, dripping water and blood onto the pages still underneath him. Painfully, he started to rise. Kitten Face stood and watched him. There was something really awful about the expression on the androgynous gunman's face. He was smiling, like it was cute, you know? Cute to watch the broken Gunther try to stand. Like Gunther was a toddler just learning to stand, and he, Kitten Face, was the toddler's admiring mother. Billiard Ball, meanwhile, stood with his massive arms crossed on his massive chest. He sneered cold death at me, just as he had from the window of the Black Mustang. Gunther pushed up onto his knees. Every move he made brought another grunt of effort out of him. He wiped the blood off his mouth with his hand, grimacing at the pain in his nose. Then, grunting some more, he rose to his feet. I could tell he was still drunk from the way he staggered a step, his body swaying like a reed in the wind. "Who the fuck are you people?" he said, gingerly touching his nose again. He was talking to Kitten Face, even though it was Billiard Ball who'd given him the beating. "Huh? What the hell did he rough me up for? I told him I didn't know anything." Kitten Face pouted and smirked and glanced over at Billiard Ball. "He doesn't know anything," Billiard Ball said. He had a surprisingly high voice, almost mousy. Strange to hear it come out of a guy that size. "See," said Gunther. "What did I tell you? It's nothing to me if..." Kitten Face shot him dead. The murder of Sean Gunther was so nonchalant I couldn't take it in at first. Still pouting and posing and sticking his hip out provocatively, Kitten Face simply flicked his wrist to move the gun from me to Gunther, then pulled the trigger and flicked his wrist to point the gun at me again. The shot was loud and flat, like a ruler whapping a desktop. I hardly would have known what it was if I hadn't seen the burst of smoke and flame from the barrel. Even so, I couldn't believe it. I stared at Gunther as if I expected him to finish his sentence. He didn't finish his sentence. He staggered again. He turned toward me with his head down, looking in stunned surprise at the ragged black hole that was now in the middle of his white shirt just beneath his sternum. Then he lifted his eyes to me. The expression on his face was terrible. He was just beginning to realize that the story of his life was over. Any plans he had for change or renewed success or personal redemption, they were all off. Time was up. He crumpled to the floor and let out a death rattle, a throaty breath. Finally, he lay utterly still, staring sightless at the ceiling. That terrible expression was now frozen on his face forever. "Ah," said Kitten Face. "Poor thing." I think if I could have, I would have killed him then, killed him with my bare hands. I was that angry. It was such a dismal thing to do, just shoot the man like that for no reason. And the girly gay humor made it worse somehow, like it was nothing. Like Gunther's life was nothing, like it was all about Kitten Face, his cute little joke, his cute little show. But that wasn't what it was to me. The reality of the author's death was beginning to register on my brain now, as final and inarguable as a brick wall. I had never experienced death before, never seen a man die, never even knew anyone who died, not anyone I cared about. There was the jailer in the dungeon when the ogre bit his head off, I guess. But that wasn't like this, not real like this. Cowled jailers with torches, ogres, dungeons. All that was just too insane to be real. Not like this. Kitten Face was coming toward me now, swinging his hips elaborately, daintily stepping over Gunther's corpse as if it were a puddle. "What's the matter, Peaches?" he said to me as he came. "You look pale. Something troubling you?" My eyes flashed to the body on the floor. Kitten Face glanced back at it. "Oh, yes, poor darling." But then he didn't know anything. He came up close, then closer, keeping the gun on me. "What about you, sweet cheeks?" he said. He reached out with his free hand and squeezed my cheeks between his thumb and fingers as if I were a child, holding his gun on me so I couldn't push him off, or anyway, didn't dare. "What do you know? Do you know anything? I didn't know anything, and I figured when I said so, he'd kill me too. And I was even more scared than I was before, and I had been plenty scared before. But I was also furious, helplessly furious, at being mocked and manhandled like this. "Tell Mama," Kitten Face said, and he let go of me and slapped me. Not hard, but hard enough to hurt. I wanted to jump him. I wanted to kill him. He was muscular but small, smaller than me, and I might have been able to do it, angry as I was. But the gun held me in place. I didn't have the courage to try. "Tell Mama what you know," he said. "I don't even know what you want," I said. My voice came out thin and tight. I was strangling on my helplessness and rage. "Ooh, baby's angry, isn't he?" Kitten Face said. He patted my cheek, more softly this time. "Don't be an angry baby, Peaches. You know what I want. I want what you want. The book, the woman, Ellen. What do you know about those?" What could I say? What could I tell him that would keep me alive? I just stood there, staring at the gun barrel, staring past the gun barrel at his pouting, preening, feline face, waiting for him to pull the trigger, wishing I had the guts to attack him. And why not, since I was going to die here anyway? But I didn't attack him. I just stood there. "You're being very naughty," he said, waggling the gun back and forth, the way he had when he'd turned it on Gunther and fired. "Don't make Mama punish you." An idea came to me. Something to say anyway. My mouth was so dry I couldn't get the words out at first. I had to lick my lips and swallow hard before I tried. I tilted my head toward the cabinet. "It's in there. The book. If that's the book you mean." Kitten Face followed my gesture. He touched his lips with a finger and made a theatrical moo of surprise when he saw the big volume with the red binding. Another Kingdom. He kept the gun trained on me as he slinked over to the cabinet. He kept the gun trained on me as he lowered himself gracefully and plucked the volume from the shelf. Then he wagged the book in my face. It wasn't a book. It was a fake. Just a binding. No pages inside. Kitten Face tossed it at me. I knocked it out of the air. It flapped to the floor. "So that's no help, is it?" he said. "Is that the only copy?" "It's the only one I know of," I said. I felt like I was signing my own death warrant. And sure enough, Kitten Face stepped toward me and pressed the barrel of his gun hard into my forehead. My brain told me I had nothing to lose. I could make my move, grab the gun, turn it on him, kill him like he deserved. Maybe even shoot down Billiard Ball too. Be a man, I thought. But I couldn't do it. "So you're not much use to me either, are you?" he said. I didn't answer. He pressed the gun against me harder, making me hurt. "Are you, you naughty baby?" I still didn't answer. Because fuck him. I was a dead man anyway, so fuck him. I waited for him to pull the trigger, afraid of death and furious at my killer and sad that I was going to die. But I didn't have the courage to go for the gun. Then, from across the room, Billiard Ball made a noise. A little cough. Barely audible. Kitten Face drew the gun away. "All right," he drawled. "Let's go." He marched me at gunpoint out of the house, along the path, through the driveway door, down the drive, back to my car where it was parked across the street in the shadows. Billiard Ball walked just behind us. I caught a glimpse of him in the car window, hands in his pants pockets as he strolled casually along, barely paying attention, eyeing the night as if this were just a stroll in the garden. Now that it seemed Kitten Face wasn't going to kill me right then and there, my frozen mind started to work again, and I realized this now, What was happening to me right here and now made no more sense than my insane supernatural trips to Galliana. Who were these people? What did they want from me? Why me? I thought of Gunther lying back there in the house, all his plans over, all his hopes gone. For what? What was it all about? What could it be about? Had Gunther known the answer? Had he understood why his future was erased like that? His life, such as it was, erased just like that? We reached my Nissan. Kittenface spoke to Billiard Ball. "You take the Stang. Peaches and I will drive back in his car," he added to me. "Won't that be cozy, Peaches?" Billiard Ball didn't answer, just obeyed. He strolled off to the black Mustang, which was now parked at the curb just a few yards up the road. Kittenface prodded me in the back with his gun. "Get behind the wheel, darling," he told me, "and don't try anything or I'll blow your balls off. You won't like that. No one ever does." I unlocked the door and pulled it open. I took a quick glance back at Kittenface. I don't think he was expecting me to do that because I caught him with an expression on his mug that wasn't part of the whole showy camp repertoire. It was a hollow expression, slack and dead-eyed. The expression of a man sitting alone in his room as the sun went down, contemplating a life of emptiness and despair. I lowered myself into the car, and like the snap of a finger, I was blind. I couldn't see anything. Had he shot me? Was I dead? Everything was blackness. Then the next moment I felt my body sliding downward, bumping downward over a rough surface, then flying off the surface and into the empty air. I heard a shout from above and behind me. "Go after him!" I heard another voice, urgent in the pitch blackness. "This way!" There was a moment of stunned confusion before I recognized the nasal, squeaking female voice of the mutant rodent Maud from Galliana. Christ, I was back in the dungeon again. I was running for my life again with the executioner and the guard right behind me. I remembered I had pulled the grate out of the wall and scrambled head first through the opening. I must have slid through some sort of chute into this blackness. I smelled shit all around me. As if I were in a sewer, I saw a light up ahead of me, a flash of sparkling colored lights. Maud. I started running toward her.
This has been Another Kingdom by Andrew Klavan, performed by Michael Knowles.